They understand too that we don't own the firehouses, we don't own the ambulance facility, and this is bringing everything together. I think people are kind of okay with it. I haven't had any bad feedback once they understand those issues.
Thank you. I know for myself, I received several emails and comments. Most were positive. I had one opposition. I'm just concerned about the cost of it, and why would we be paying that if we have existing facilities that are doing the job today. So I was able to explain what we learned from our first responders in an email back.
Right, that we don't actually own those buildings, they do.
Yeah, and I had a similar response, opposition to it, under the premise that it wasn't fully necessary. Also, the concept of that we didn't own a fire station.
Right.
They didn't know that. Largely, though, the people, because it's so close to me, a lot of the people that have been tied to that particular development of that area have a positive outlook on the idea and what could potentially go there. And I think it's, when they looked at the alternatives as they've seen them and heard about them over the years, and this seemed much more attractive than anything that they had heard before. So it's largely been positive. Again, I had one person who was opposed to it, but I responded. I haven't heard back yet because it kind of answered all the questions that were outstanding there. And I'm with you, Kathleen, as far as the value of the property. I feel that just based off a number of things, that it's a fair number to be paying for that property. But yeah, that's what I've received so far.
Thank you. Anyone
Positive.
else?
I've had positive, and one person asked me why, and I said, well, we've kind of outgrown what we have now, and since we have so many volunteers now, we need the space for the equipment. So they were happy with that answer.
Adrian?
I guess this would count as public comment, but my own wife asked me, why do we need this sort of thing? And even from the beginning, this was a bit of a surprise that we got lucky with coming into this situation. Not only for that, there's this parcel of land that has this potential for it, but also the price that we would be paying for it is a very good value. It's not paying a premium, but the bigger thing is, I believe, the fire department and what they said. One, lots of Pennsylvania, most of Pennsylvania relies on a volunteer fire department. We are no different. So we have to do things to continue enticing them to volunteer with us. And these are the people who will risk their lives for us. And we're really just trying to say, should we give them adequate facilities to do their job? And having toured the fire departments before, like months ago, way before this was even a consideration, it was already known that there was a new need for building and space and other things just to do the job they're already doing. And then when they came in here and said that their option is that they would still have to pursue finding a new location if this doesn't go through, us putting it all on them to say, we appreciate what you do for us, but you're on your own needing to find a place. And I know it wouldn't fully be that way, but this is a sign that we care about those people, those emergency service providers who risk their lives, who save lives, and that ever since my first year, our budget and our willingness to do this for the community shows that we care about emergency services and the safety of our community. And I think this would be an extremely long-term investment that can help out our firefighters in a way that they just wouldn't be able to by any conceivable means, even looking at the next several years. So I think it would be very, very helpful, not only for the fire department, but also for the Narberth ambulance, who, again, like they said, they can't even house both of their ambulances at one time in their current building and size. So I think it's really catching up to what they need in order to do their jobs.
Thank you. Alan?
From Ward 1, all of the comments have been positive. Everyone I talk to in my ward is looking forward to it, thinks it's a good idea.
And I want to jump in there. One thing I've heard from people too is they're so glad that the washies are going to stay.
Yeah.
That they're going to be down there and housing the river equipment. So
Yeah, it's a pillar of our community, and it needs
yeah,
to.
and
Yes.
yeah. So I think that's a positive thing.
Stephanie, we are not the real estate expertise in the room. We are the decision makers based on information that the experts present to us. Can you talk to us a little bit about the value of the property and how it was determined that the price was a fair price versus a markup because it's prime property?
Every process when you're looking at a real estate transaction has procedures in order to ensure that the price that you potentially will be paying for that property is in fact a fair market value. And our real estate professionals went through that process to confirm for Borough Council that 5.1 is a deal that the Borough of Conshohocken should consider, especially considering the services that that building and the land could provide in the future. So that due diligence was done.
I don't think we can comment necessarily on what that does to the real estate market, though, but I think what we can see is what home sales do to the real estate market. I mean, I would
Correct.
assume that the same plays out for commercial properties.
That is correct.
Do you think it's fair to say that commercial property is more valuable per square foot than residential in general?
Yes.
Mayor, have you heard anything or anything you want to share?
Yeah, so I've gotten some texts and social media messages, all very positive. I think when trying to keep it more emergency services, I just keep going back to look at what the heads of our fire department and ambulance had to say, and our emergency services director. I think when we are operating at our best, we rely on our professionals. I certainly rely on Chief Lennon for any police questions. So if they're sitting up here and making a strong case that this is an investment that they need, that this will keep our community safe, I think from the mayor standpoint, I think that's very, very compelling.
Thank you. And then Stephanie, lastly, has anything come in through administration related to the purchase of the land that we need to know about to take into consideration?
We have not received any public comment regarding the land acquisition. We have received comment from the first responders who were here that evening presenting, but also their colleagues, passing along a thank you to Borough Council and the elected officials for considering this strategic decision for the future and their vitality.
And then I think the other question that Marianne had was related to remediation and how that's built into the sale of the property, and if there is remediation costs, who bears the
So there
how
will
it's
be
written today?
So environmental and remediation. So they are a part of the agreement of sale, as they are with every transaction, and there will be a phase 1 and a phase 2 study that is done to determine the conditions on the property. If it comes back that there are remediation issues, which we are expecting, they would be at the expense of the Borough of Conshohocken. So it would be $5.1 million plus your closing costs, tax costs, remediation costs.
And if I remember, we had our engineer go through it already once.
We
I
had-
did not see.
No, there was no major red flag. So we went through the environmental studies that were completed by the owner of the property. There was no red flags, but we are doing our due diligence and conducting our own, which also will be part of the agreement of sale. So There are specific terms that are still being negotiated in that agreement of sale, and I'll go over them shortly. But yes, the reality is there could be and may be environmental issues on the site, which would then need to be remediated at the borough expense in order to move forward with the future plans of that facility.
And if we were buying a different parcel of land,
That
Just
same process
would-
would exist.
but would we have had the ability to see plans that were already looked at by?
Depending on the owner and the property, I don't know, but in this specific scenario, they were available and provided.
Okay.
And so we took the opportunity to review them.
Great. Council, do you have any other additional questions related to this? Stephanie, did you have any other presentations you wanted to do?
No, I just want to provide information relative to the actual agreement of sale, and there are specific terms that we are still negotiating and will continue to negotiate until those terms are final. Just to highlight the few pertinent issues, there is a deposit that's required with the transaction. That final number is going to range between $25,000 and $100,000, and that number is being negotiated. The due diligence period, right now we're looking at a range between 30 days and 120 days, again, up for negotiation. The title review procedures, so the Borough of Conshohocken, through our attorney, presented a title review procedure. The seller came back with a request for negotiated terms. Again, that is up for negotiation and still in process. The environmental we already talked about. We're going back and forth between as-is condition and conducting the phase 1, phase 2 to determine acceptable condition. So again, up for negotiation. Transfer taxes. The seller is proposing that we pay a 50-50 split. There is a stipulation with municipalities, depending on how the state accepts it, that we can apply for an exemption to that transfer tax, so we would pay it up front, potentially apply for the exception, possibly get it, but that option does exist. So we have done that process with other properties that we have either sold or acquired. So we would conduct the same process and determine whether we could receive a return on those tax dollars. The closing timeline, we're looking between 15 and 60 days, so again, up for negotiation. And then the borough is requesting that right now there are dumpsters, cars, and equipment on the property, and prior to settlement, we are requesting that all of those items be removed from the property. So those, in a large agreement of sale document, we have dwindled it down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 items that we are within a range of negotiation. And what's in front of you this evening is that agreement of sale. And it would be approved contingent upon final review and approval by the borough solicitor and the borough manager.
Okay. Any additional questions for Stephanie based on the new information related to those 7 items? Okay. Hearing no additional questions, and thank you for that information, Stephanie. Do I have a motion to approve an agreement of sale with Provco Pineville Fayette LP for the properties located at parcel 05-00-03392-005, parcel number 05-00-03388-009, and parcel number 6500-01024-009, subject to final review and final approval by the borough manager and borough solicitor.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Is anyone opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next item on the agenda is consider approving a cash acquisition for the purchase of properties located at 1109 Fayette Street, 1119 Fayette Street, and 1201 East Butler Pike. And I'm not going to call out the parcel numbers again, but we have the addresses. Any questions related to a cash acquisition on the purchase of this property?
Just take,
Stefan, oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Did you do the interest rate versus the cash?
I did. So we did provide, your accountant, your certified public accountant provided amortized schedules based off of the different interest rate options and terms that were provided by your main financial provider. So there are actual costs that were provided for the finance charge. The cheapest option still equates to roughly $860,000 in costs in order to finance that amount. Therefore, given the cash financial position of the borough at this time, which is very healthy, you're looking at cash at the end of May 31st at $39.1 million. That's roughly a $5.1 million increase from end of April 30th. So ironically, those numbers line up very well. So just because of the cost of the financing that's involved and the fact that the borough has a healthy cash position, the recommendation, which has been reviewed by your financial consultant and your CPA, is to move forward with a cash acquisition for the land. And then you would look for financing in the future as it relates to the construction of the facility, which you would actually be eligible potentially for greater borrowing capacity because you have acquired an asset that does not depreciate, it appreciates.
So having the cash purchase, it becomes a full asset rather than having a depreciation.
It becomes a full asset, which will be added and included in your capital asset list, which is then taken into consideration as you are evaluating your options in terms of debt borrowing.
Ralph, did you have a question?
No, I was just going to clarify. So you were saying basically it's like cash in, cash out because of the way it was 34 to 39, and then that's
At the close of April 30th, your cash position was $34 million. At the close of May 31st, your cash position was $39.1 million. So if
Okay.
you're just looking at cash on hand, the cash that came in is the cash that's going out. Now you have to utilize that cash for your operational budget.
Sure.
But if you're looking at just straight revenues from a monthly perspective on a 30-day cycle, yes, cash in, cash out.
Okay.
And then just kind of stepping this out, we have the property. When it's time to build on the property, that would be when we would be looking at financing whatever the professionals and public have decided is the way that this
Correct.
building will.
Yeah, the intent is, once the asset is yours, then you can formulate whatever public committees spearheaded by your first responders, because they're the experts in the room, in terms of what that future facility will look like and what that future facility needs. Once that is formulated, then you start the financing portion of it. So what are the actual real costs, which will be designated by professionals that you've hired in order to calculate those for you, and then you go out for your financing.
And based on what's happening in fire services and what the state is identifying as a concern as the years progress, I would assume that we would also be going after some grants and other things to help fund these projects.
Of course we would. We have already strategically reached out to some of our legislators, including the state representative and the state senator, to give them the opportunity to be aware that the borough is making this a priority. And there are grant dollars that hopefully will be available. We are aggressive when it comes to acquiring grant dollars from a borough perspective across the board. I think in the last roughly 8 years, you're looking at roughly $15.5 million received in grant dollars. We also have outstanding, as of today, for 2024, applications in for roughly $850,000 worth of grant dollars. So if we were to receive that $850,000, you're looking at in excess of 16 million, we'll just say. And then if you equate that over the 8 years, you're looking at least $2 million annually that's supplementing your revenues. It's roughly almost close to what you accumulate in real estate taxes on an annual basis. So yes, we will be seeking out grant dollars like we do for everything else.
Great. Any other questions?
Nope.
All right, hearing no other questions, I am looking for a motion to approve a cash acquisition for the properties located at parcel number 05003392005, parcel number 0500-03388-009, and parcel 650001024009, in the amount of $5.1 million plus associated closing costs, applicable transfer taxes, and applicable environmental testing and remediation.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is to consider approving Resolution 2024-09, declaring the borough's intent to reimburse itself from the proceeds of debt to be used for the project.
This is an administrative business item, so if the borough was going to move forward with, actually with the financing option, you would have needed this resolution on file. However, by passing the resolution as well, there are regulations, and Erica, you can jump in, correct me if I'm wrong, but pertaining to DCED, borrowing, timelines of borrowing. So if there's anything that is accumulated during the course of this transaction or unforeseen costs that we may want to finance, having this resolution on file allows for us to potentially retroactively go back and include it in whatever future borrowing we may, or financing we may look to acquire related to this project. So it is an administrative business item to have it on file in-house, given the large scope of this project, to ensure that the interests of the borough are protected in all different capacities. Good? Okay, thank you.
Anyone have any questions related to that explanation?
No.
Okay, hearing no questions, could I have a motion to approve the Resolution 2024-09, declaring the borough's intent to reimburse itself for the proceeds of debt to be issued for the project as applicable?
Make that motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is to consider approving Resolution 2024-10, authorizing the expenditure of funds for the purchase of the real estate property.
So again, Council President Sokolowski, this is another administrative item to have on file. This resolution in particular grants authority to the borough manager and the borough solicitor to take the actions that are necessary to effectuate the purchase of the real property, which includes providing the actual authority to expend the funds and execute the documents once they are negotiated and in their final format.
Questions?
Nope.
Hearing no questions, I would be looking for a motion to approve Resolution 2024-10, authorizing the expenditure of funds for the purchase of the real estate property and granting authority to the borough manager and the borough solicitor to take such actions that are reasonably necessary to effectuate the purchase of the property, including the authority to expend funds and execute the necessary documents.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is to consider authorizing the advertisement of an ordinance amendment to the borough's food vendor regulations. Anyone have any questions on the information that was given to us about the amendment for the vendor regulations? Stephanie, did you have anything to add that
I don't have anything to add. We discussed it at the June 5th meeting. The authority being granted this evening is simply to advertise the amendment. The amendment will be advertised, and then it'll appear on your July 17th agenda for consideration for adoption.
Hearing no questions, do I have a motion to authorize the advertisement of an amendment to the food vendor ordinance and the regulations?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is to consider appointing the positions of patrol officers from the Civil Service Certified Eligibility List.
We are, under council's direction and the mayor's direction, Chief Lennon has presented recommendations as it pertains to the organizational structure of the police department moving into the future. The recommendation was that the position of a detective sergeant be formulated, and we also have an officer that is retiring. Therefore, there is a need to backfill the roles now that we have promotion and retirement shortly upon us. So that position of detective sergeant will be a lateral move for one of the 4 current sergeants that exist in the department today. That would then open up a position of sergeant. So the Civil Service Commission did certify a sergeant list in 2023. The Civil Service Commission extended that list in 2024, so that list is still applicable. Therefore, the next individual on that certified list is Eric Hall, and Eric Hall has indicated his interest in serving in that sergeant role. Therefore, in front of you this evening is a motion to appoint Eric Hall to the position of sergeant from the Civil Service Certified Eligibility List. At the same time, we have a veteran officer who has served his 25-plus years with the Borough of Conshohocken, and Officer McLaughlin will be retiring in July. And therefore, we have a vacancy at the patrol officer position, and we're recommending that Borough Council appoint the position of patrol officer from the 2024 Civil Service Certified Eligibility List. And because Eric Hall is being promoted to sergeant, you will have another vacancy at patrol officer, and therefore there are 2 appointments to patrol officer. So that is a long-winded way of stating that we are asking you this evening to consider appointing Eric Hall to sergeant and appointing Eric Perna and Patrick Fusco to patrol officer. And if the motions pass, then they will be sworn in at your July 17th meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Well, first I was going to ask if there's any questions, comments, or statements that anybody would like to share related to this topic. But thank you.
I would, I guess just for the public to know this, as with a lot of employment positions, like still looking at a police officer as, working a job, the applicant pools have gotten smaller and smaller, and then we also have the civil services certification that we have them go through, which is even higher level and higher standard that we require. So the applicant pool again gets even smaller. So I really do support this and also the urgency of doing it, knowing that time is of the essence, because just like any job, we want to make these offers, we want to bring these people on before other municipalities also have a chance to get these really good candidates.
Thank you. Ellen?
Fiscal impact.
Yes.
So can we talk about, we're talking about 2 patrolmen and a sergeant, but what's the current fiscal impact of these 3 people?
So for the 2024 fiscal year, the remainder of this year, you will not see a financial impact because you have certain positions within the department that are already budgeted for, and those allocated funds will be utilized to pay for these 3 individuals, their salary and their benefits. Moving into 2025, you will see, in addition to the budget, of the detective sergeant position. Those costs that are associated specifically with that newly created position will be new dollars allocated in your 2025 budget. But the remainder of your budget will stay the same for the time being in 2025, while Chief Lennon does a full assessment of the department and presents to you most likely in 2026 for any other needs as it relates to the growth of the borough, the structure of the department, and the budget as it exists at that period of time.
So Stephanie, although it's another FTE for fiscal year '25 that we'll have to build into the budget,
Yes.
would it be fair to say that by creating this type of career ladder for our staff, that it then opens up more of the lower costing positions, and the higher expense positions are now starting to retire, move out, and then in some ways, in the long run, we would have the potential for an overall budget?
Yes, you'll see we are heavily swayed towards the veteran officers, and you have a class of officers. You saw them when they were all recognized for their 25 plus years of service that will be entering potentially retirement age. The costs associated with that longevity will go away. And as you have new classes coming in, clearly your longevity percentages are much lower, and therefore the costs are less.
Ralph or Kathleen, any feedback?
No.
Mr. Mayor, your department?
I think with planning as the borough continues to grow, myself and council directed Chief Lennon to to show us a design of what that looks like in the department. And this is one of those steps, both in having a sergeant detective and in bringing in new officers. So this is right in line with our plans for making sure that our police department grows along with what we're seeing in the borough.
And I apologize to step on your comment, Mr. Mayor, but the other part of that conversation I'd like to add that I've heard is that this is incremental growth. This isn't hire a bunch, add them on, get them here. It's incremental growth to match our growing size. So.
Anything else we want to talk about? Okay. So hearing no other feedback, comments, or statements, I'm asking for a motion to appoint Eric Perna and Patrick Fusco to the positions of patrol officer from the Civil Service Commission Certified Eligibility List, along with appointing Eric Hall to the sergeant position.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is consideration of authorizing an advertisement for an RFP for marketing services. So Stephanie, I think we had a presentation about the marketing services at our last meeting. Council, are there any questions related to the presentation or what you have read in your upload? Okay. Hearing none, Stephanie, if you have no further comments, I would be looking for a motion to authorize the advertisement for the RFP for marketing services.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is new business. First item is considering adopting the language access plan for the housing rehabilitation program. So I will turn this over to Stephanie to go through
Yes.
just a little more background on this.
So we have two programs that we operate, housing rehabilitation, community development. We receive federal funds in order to provide those services to the Conshohocken community. With both of those programs, there could be, may be, individuals who don't speak English or require assistance in terms of discussing and explaining those two programs. And therefore, we, as the borough, make sure we have the resources available in-house and or with an external partner in order for any individual, regardless of what language they speak, to be able to take place in this program. And so the Language Access Plan is a requirement of the home program and the CDBG program. It's part of the home application. And Ms. Stetler does a great job in terms of generating the access plan and ensuring we have the resources available to accommodate every resident in the Borough of Conshohocken to make sure they can take advantage of this service, this quality and amazing service that we provide to the community. And so in front of you, we are preparing the home application, the submission of it. Ms. Stetler was here and hosted a hearing. She'll be back in front of you with a resolution for the submission of the actual application, but the Language Access Plan certification requires council's review, consideration, and motion to adopt.
Any questions related to the Language Access Plan? Okay, hearing no questions, would I have a motion to adopt the borough's Language Access Plan for the Housing Rehab Program?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda under new business is to consider approving zoning escrow release for 720 to 730 Fayette Street, 340 East 7th Avenue, and 434 Pleasant Valley Drive.
These are just zoning applications that have been closed out. Their escrow dollars that are submitted along with their applications are calculated in terms of fees and costs that need to be taken out of the escrow, and any remaining dollars returned to the applicant. So the three cases in front of you this evening are closed, processed, decisions rendered, and escrow dollars plus interest are ready to be returned to the applicants.
Any questions related to escrow releases?
No.
Hearing no questions, could I have a motion to approve the escrow release for 727 to 730 Fayette Street in the amount of $376.84 plus interest, for 340 East 7th Avenue in the amount of $175.21 plus interest, and for 434 Pleasant Valley Drive in the amount of $148.33 plus interest.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Do we have any public comment this evening? Hearing no public comment, we will move on to our mayor and council announcements. Mr. Mayor, you're on.
All right, thank you. So we actually had Flag Day last week, and the VFW Auxiliary put together a little event for the kids that turned out really well. So just a thank you to them. I actually did not know much about Flag Day, so I learned a lot. Thomas ate the crayons, but otherwise we had a really good time. We also we have the Eastern Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce coming into the borough to work with our businesses, and they hosted a kickoff at Hotel Westin Main, and Leslie Richards, the CEO of SEPTA, was there, and her and I both gave some welcome presentations to all the businesses that joined us. So we are very much looking forward to having a chamber in town, and hope that it creates a little more of a streamlined way to contact businesses as opposed to going to every single one individually. So we're looking forward to see where this relationship goes. And then a big thank you from this is from the volunteer team that puts on the Arts Fest. A big thank you to everyone that made it happen. And if you wanted to plug into your phones June 7th, 2025, you'd be welcome to do so. And that's it for me.
Thank you. Councilman Fry? Councilman Kingsley? Councilwoman Barton?
I'm good.
Councilman Serna?
Nothing.
I couldn't roll my tongue, I tried.
Nothing tonight.
Councilmember Chmielewski.
Nothing for me.
Chmielewski. You're welcome. I just want to say that we hosted the senior summer picnic luncheon. That was a very nice event. Thank you to the borough staff who put that on. The food went over very well. It was from Mission Barbecue, and everyone loved the food, and everybody loves Mr. Run's coleslaw. So it was a great event, and a lot of faces, some new faces too, at the event. So please join us in our events. All right. Anyone else? Going once, going twice, not hearing anything? I will say this evening's meeting is adjourned.